Good afternoon. Welcome. We are so glad that you are here tonight. Not tonight, today. I'm thinking of last night. We saw a wonderful performance last night, and we're so glad that Peterson is going to do this again for us today, this afternoon. My name is Shelley Poe, and I'm the senior minister here at Little River. If it is the first time that you have entered these walls, I want to welcome you to this historic place. This congregation was founded in the 1950s specifically for the purpose of worshiping with people from every background and race at a time when segregation was the law of the land. We also have the honor of being the home church for many, many years of the first openly lesbian ordained clergy member in the United States, the Reverend Ann Holmes. In this house of worship, we believe that Black lives matter, that women's rights are human rights, that no human is illegal, that science is real, that love is love, and that diversity makes us stronger. Can I get an amen? Amen. Today, before we begin, I want to be very clear about something else. This is a church. It is a house of worship. And what that means is that this is exactly the place to express our love, our joy, and our laughter. God knows we need some laughter right about now. So if you were planning to sit quietly and nod politely, I want to give you permission to change your game plan, to let loose, and to have some fun. Peterson Toscano is no ordinary performer. He's a shapeshifter, a comic storyteller, and a theatrical force of nature. For years, Peterson has captivated audiences around the world with his razor-sharp wit, his deeply human stories, and boundary-breaking performances. Whether he's taking on multiple characters in a single breath, weaving together humor and history, or diving headfirst into the absurdities of life, Peterson delivers more than just a show. He creates an experience. While he used to be on the road regularly, these days he's highly selective about when and where he performs. So the fact that he is here today is a gift. If you've never seen him in action before, you're in for something unexpected, something hilarious, and something that might just shift the way you see the world. So please join me in welcoming the one, the only, Peterson Toscano.
Thank you. Nice outfit you got there. We showed up today, we're like, oh, we're wearing the same thing. I had another top I was gonna wear, but it was the same color as the rug, and I thought, no, that's not gonna work. Thank you so much for coming to a very odd presentation. I say that because I'm going to tell you 3 different stories. These stories will appear to have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and then through the magic of performance art, everything will be connected, and you'll see all the connections. It might take you a couple of days or weeks to kind of work them all out, but you'll get it. Each story has a title, and each one has a performance element where I will perform in this area in character, and I'll do a little talky bits over here. And I think that's all, except I really do want to reinforce this idea of your response. Audiences have no idea the kind of power you wield. Performers get our energy from you. And if you play your cards right, and if you laugh loud, and you get involved, you could probably turn me into your personal performing monkey. I'm not joking. So let's start with our first story, which is called Homo Nomo. Homo Nomo. So I am gay, which these days is pretty boring, right? There was a time, if a gay man stood up at a pulpit and said, I am gay, all hell would break loose. But now it's like, sure, what else you got? Now, there are other identities for whom people do freak out about, and for whom it's not safe to be moving freely in the world all the time. But for me, as a white, gay man, I'm boring. I get it. But I do have an exotic backstory, which helps. Because although I'm gay, there was a big chunk of my life that I attempted to become straight through what's known as gay conversion therapy, or ex-gay ministries, or just pray away the gay. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. But I was very committed. I spent 17 years and over $30,000 on 3 continents attempting and utterly failing to de-gay myself. Which, anytime that gets mentioned in any conversation, people have questions, right? The number one question is, what did they do? Like, what are the methods that they do? And the number 2 question was, wait, did you all hook up with each other? The methods that I went through were multiple. There were 12-step programs, support groups. There were a couple of exorcisms, one that got broken up by the police, actually. It got a little loud. And then I spent 2 years at the notorious Love in Action program in Memphis, Tennessee, a place I affectionately call the Homo Nomo Halfway House. And there was a film out not too long ago called Boy Erased with Nicole Kidman in it about a young man who's forced to attend one of these programs. Well, it was the same program that I was in Memphis, Tennessee. But when I was there, they were just taking adults who chose to go, but then they started having a youth program. He spent 2 weeks in the program, and it was harrowing. So much so that he wrote a best-selling memoir that got turned into a film with Nicole Kidman. I spent 2 years in the program because I just don't know how to say no. I was in it. And no, people did not hook up. It was kind of extraordinary. You would think, get a bunch of homosexuals struggling with homosexuality, living together. We were just so miserable. We didn't have time for anything else. Now, I could tell you about Love in Action, the Homo Nomo Halfway House, but I thought I would just show you. Through doing a scene from my comedy called Doing Time in the Homo Nomo Halfway House, How I Survived the Ex-Gay Movement. This is just the opening scene. Everything you see in this moment is true. Like, all of it took place. You'll hear about rules. That's all true. And it is ridiculous. So feel free to laugh. It's all right, even if it seems weird to laugh at certain things, but like, sometimes we have to laugh at the most ridiculous, even when there's pain in the middle of it. So here is a scene from Doing Time in the Homo Nomo Halfway House, How I Survived the Ex-Gay Movement. Hi, and welcome to the Homo Nomo Halfway House. My name is Chad, and I will be your tour guide. The Homo Nomo Halfway House is a Christian residential 12-step program that helps men, and women too, overcome homosexuality and compulsive sexual behavior. It's an amazing program, and I thank God that they took me in just in time. Now, before we go any further, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the rules and how it operates, and to assist me with that is one of our newest participants, Vlad. Hey, Vlad, we're ready for you. Vlad is from the former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan. I never say it right, but it is so exciting what the Lord has done, how he has torn down those horrible iron curtains, and those people who for years lived under so much lies and oppression are now free to come to our country and be part of a program like this one. Yeah, thank you, Jesus. All right, so here's Vlad. Hey, Vlad. So Vlad's going to tell you a little bit about the program and how it operates, and I'll add my running commentary as I do. And don't be nervous, Vlad. You'll be fine. They seem like a very friendly group today. Unlike last week, when we were infiltrated by those UCC people. They're so intolerant.
Hello, my name is Vlad. I have been in this Homo Nomo Halfway House for 27 days. Here in Homo Nomo Halfway House, we have 5 phases. We do 12 steps, and there are approximately 275 rules. First, I tell you about our phases. When we move from phase to phase, this is called a phase bump. Technically, only the staff is allowed to bump you. Now I tell you about the rules. Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, we have many rules. The rules serve as boundaries because as practicing homosexuals, we had no boundaries. Now, to me, all of the rules, they are important, of course, but probably the most important rule of all is you must fuck us.
Oh my gosh, what are you talking about?
No, this is true. This is what you say. You must fuck us. You fuck us on the issues. You fuck us on the family. You fuck us.
Oh my gosh, no, silly. We pronounce that word focus. And you need to promise me that from now on, that's how you're gonna say it. It's focus, okay?
No, this is what I said. Fuck us. Now I tell you about the rules. Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, you cannot exceed more than 15 minutes per day behind a closed bathroom door. They keep timers in the bathroom so you can keep a proper accounting of your activities. Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, you must shave every day. Yes, and this includes women too. Yes, women, you must shave here. You must shave here, but you must not touch the upside down triangle.
Ew and inappropriate, and we'll talk about that later. And when we shave, we are forbidden to wear any aftershave or cologne. And there's a really important reason for this, the sense memory of smell. You see, I could smell a scent of a former sexual partner, and it could trigger me, just like that. So can I please say, for my safety and yours, could you please stay in the back of the tour if you're wearing Calvin Klein Obsession?
Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, you cannot go to the movies. You cannot watch television. You cannot surf internet. You cannot have mobile phone. You cannot listen to music. Well, they do let us listen to contemporary Christian music. Praise the Lord. Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, you are forbidden to have sex with anyone, sexual relations with anyone, including yourself. Here in Homo no Mo Halfway House, you must report all FI behavior. FI stands for false image, because in our former lives as practicing homosexuals, we often hid behind masks.
Oh my gosh, that's so true, Vlad. We would plaster over our God-given personalities with these false image masks. Well, take me, for instance. Oh my gosh, before I came into this program, I was very effeminate. And they have done wonders on me. I really think it has a lot to do with our weekly football clinics. It's really butched me up. Well, there are tons more rules, and I'm sure they're gonna pop up as we go through our tour. But before we go any further, Vlad, I want to give you positive credit, because throughout your entire presentation, you held your hands to your side and you maintained good eye contact, which is very healthy masculine behavior. But not for you, ladies. It's a little aggressive coming from you. All right, let's give them a little round of applause, shall we? And scene. Enough of that. So that is the homo. Thank you. That's right. We live off of applause, performers. That's right. If you liked what you saw, there's a lot more. It's a 90-minute show. I play 9 different characters, and it's free on YouTube. Just go to my YouTube channel, and you can see the whole thing. It's got a whole ride, and you'll find out a lot more about Chad and his backstory. There's a lot more than meets the eye in that delightful sissy. I actually love playing that character. It helps me get in touch with the younger me that was much more of a sissy. And over time, the ex-gay movement, it really taught me to be more butch and masculine, which is rewarded in society. But people also often ask, so what was it like? What did they do? And I think that's a great question. But the question I find more interesting is why? Why did I do it in the first place? And why did I stay in it for so long? I mean, 17 years, that's no joke. Well, how I got into it, I think that's easier for me to answer. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I came of age in the 80s, and at that time, it was not easy to see any positive representation of homosexuals, as we were referred to back then. Seems like nobody liked the gays, right? Politicians, preachers, on the playground, anywhere you went, it was all negative stuff. And I learned early on that you can't be gay and Christian. You had to pick a side. So that was a big deal, and there was a lot of ugly things being said about gays, which is not, nice. It's not nice for anyone to experience that kind of oppression. And when you're gay, it's a little bit alone. It's not like your whole family's being oppressed and you can kind of find comfort with each other. It's a very lonely experience, and that's not a nice thing. And if that was all it was, I think I could have pushed through and not gotten caught up with the whole ex-gay thing. But it was a bit of a perfect storm of other things happening. For one, when I was a kid, I started reading about this weird disease called GRID. How many of you have ever heard of GRID before? Yeah, the gay-related immune deficiency. They sometimes called it gay cancer. I even heard it referred to as God's punishment against homosexuals. They later renamed it HIV/AIDS. But at first, it was called GRID. And as a young gay boy in the closet, it terrified me. I lived right outside of New York City, and the death rates were just out of control. There was a 100% fatality rate. I mean, if you had it, you were going to die. And I did the math, which was not a good idea because I'm horrible at math. But I did the math, and I was like, okay, nobody on earth seems to like homosexuals. You can die from it. God doesn't like it, and you go to hell. I'm not going to be gay. I'm American. You can be whatever you want to be. I'm going to be a heterosexual man. And I was 17, and that began that journey. And it made sense. It was a very toxic time. If I maybe was born 5 years earlier or later, those effects wouldn't have had the same impact. But why? Why did I stay in it so long? That's the harder question to answer. And I haven't fully figured it all out yet, but part of it, I think, was that as a young person, my faith has always been very important to me as a Christian, and I felt a call on my life to serve as a minister or a missionary. But as soon as it became known that I was gay or struggling with homosexuality or an ex-gay, I was disqualified from service. Doors were blocked. You can't teach Sunday school. You can't go on this mission trip. And I began to experience what women have experienced for centuries, the stained glass ceiling, right? Started bumping up against that, which is not nice, right? It's never nice that people are blocked from following their passion. And sadly, many of us have had that experience that we're like, we're better at this job, but because of who I am, I didn't get it. But for me, there was something more to it. It wasn't just that. For me, as a white man in America, I somehow had it in my head, I believed that any door I knocked on would eventually open. I mean, I might have to knock a long time, I might have to break down the door, I might need to ask a friend to go around and unlock it for me, but any door I knocked on, it was gonna open, but this time, no, shut. This door was shut. There was no way I was gonna go through that door. And as a white man in America, for me, I felt like the cabin pressure of power and privilege drop dramatically, and I felt vulnerable in the world. And I felt that I didn't have as much power as I thought I did, because there I was, this overweight, femi, gay, Italian-American Catholic in a world run by very masculine, white, male Protestants. And so I think one of the reasons I stuck with it, although in my head, I'm doing this for Jesus, I'm doing it because it's the right thing, but I think part of it was I wanted the perks that came from being perceived as a straight white male. And I'm not proud of that, but I have to say that was part of the thing that fueled the machine. Which leads us to our second story. See, we're just moving right along. You are a great audience. I'm loving the laughter. It's great. Wonderful. Our next story's title is Transfigurations. When I finally finished my time in the Homo Nomo halfway house and eventually came out, I was a very, very scared little bunny. I mean, I don't know what your image is, somebody coming out of the closet, but for me, I think about glitter and sparkles and music and it's raining. None of that for me. I was terrified, and I accepted the reality I was gay, much like someone receives the news that they have a terminal diagnosis, right? Like, you've got the gay, it's not going away, you can't manage it, it's just gonna get worse and worse, you just have to accept it. So I was like, okay. So I stepped out into the gay community, which, you know, there were bars and brunches, and I found a little group of other gay guys, other white gay guys, and we would hang out and do stuff. And I was so shy because I didn't know anything about the gay world other than all the negative stuff I learned. So I was just like in the corner and just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And who's Madonna again? Okay, great. All right. And I mean, I was like, had lived in a bunker. I'm not joking. I would listen and just kind of learn the ways of the gays. Let me learn from those who have gone before me. And now I expected that, you know, being out as a gay man, I would witness discrimination, I would witness oppression, I may even experience it. I just was a little surprised on where I saw it. Because as I sat with these other gay men, I noticed they had nothing nice to say about lesbians. I mean, they just teared them to shreds. And just women in general, and women's bodies and body parts. It was like this disgust that just like, it was like this common conversation that was going on. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I noticed too that there was unashamedly overt racism. I'd be sitting and it's like, this guy, you know, he wanted to go out with me, but I'm not gonna go date a black guy. I was like, what? And I was like, is this because we're in Memphis? Is this just a southern thing? Nope. I moved back up north to Connecticut. I saw the same thing, so overt. And I also noticed that there was a real discrimination against bisexuals. Like, someone would say they're bisexual, like, he's not bisexual, he's just gotta come to grips with who he is, he's just confused, or he's greedy. And I was like, he's lucky, I think. He has many more options. But yeah, so bisexuals didn't get a good thing. And femi-gay men, oh good Lord, that was like hateful. In fact, back then, this was before there were smartphones. There was a time. How did we live? I don't know. But there were, you know, personal ads in the paper where they had different sections, and there was like a gay section. And the #1 personal ad of men seeking men would go something like this: straight acting, masculine, gay man seeks the same. No fats, no femmes, no drugs. And I was like reading this, and I was like, wait a minute, what's a straight acting gay man? Like, do you have a wife and kids at home? Because that's what straight is. It's like, no, it was about gender. It's like, you needed to be a real man, a manly man. I was like, this sounds strangely familiar to what I've just been going through. But the worst, the most hateful group of people of all among these gay men were trans people and gender non-binary people, trans men and trans women in particular. And you know, sitting there and absorbing all this, I got more and more angry. And it's not because I have like this incredible moral sense of the world. I was just angry because I didn't just emerge from 20 years of church-inspired bigotry and oppression to land in a rainbow-clad version of the same damn thing. I'm like, we've got to do better than that. So I thought, okay, something's got to be done. At that point, I was traveling all over North America and Europe, doing my show, doing time in the Homo No Mo halfway house. I had an audience, they loved it. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna preach to the choir and maybe teach them a new song, right? I have this opportunity. And I thought, how can I get a message across to my fellow gays about being more sensitive and understanding about trans people? And I sat and I thought, of course, the most obvious thing, Bible study. Right? I mean, what better way? At least for me, because I'm a Bible scholar. And I thought, okay, what if I use my tools to discover who in the Bible transgresses and transcends gender? Who in the Bible breaks the rules of gender and rises above it? So I put on my gender lenses, which look something like this. And I started looking, and I was shocked to discover that some of the most important people in the most important Bible stories are gender non-conforming. It was like, how did I not see this? They were like big ones, big names. We're talking about the big names. And I also, at the same time, part of my research was I interviewed 100 people who identified as trans or non-binary. The term genderqueer was more popular then. And I just said, just tell me your story. And I just soaked in those stories, which were so different, one from another. But as I was soaking those stories, I was looking at the text, and I began to construct a play where I wove in some of their narratives with the biblical characters. And I created a presentation called Transfigurations, Transgressing Gender in the Bible, that I began to perform first at churches and conferences and then seminaries all over the United States. So I want to do a scene from Transfigurations, Transgressing Gender in the Bible, about Joseph in the book of Genesis. For those of you who don't know the Bible well, you may know the reference of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. A lot of people know that. Joseph had a lot of brothers, and he got into some trouble. The thing is, as a storyteller, you get to decide who gets to tell the story, right? Because depending on who tells the story, it gives it a different flavor. So I've decided I want the storyteller to be Esau, who is Jacob's uncle. Is Joseph's uncle, Jacob's twin brother. So Joseph's father is Jacob. He has a twin brother named Esau, and I want Esau to tell the story. Now, I assume there's going to be at least 2 people in the room who are like, what, who, what? Tell me, help, what's going on here? So let's break it down. You Bible geeky people who know this stuff, help me out. If I were to have an actor play Esau for us today, the Bible tells us a lot about him, his physical characteristics, his interest, his personality. Physically, what stands out in a character who's playing Esau? Hairy, Chewbacca. Yeah, he's a hairy man. They go out of their way to say how hairy he is. Like gorilla, we're talking here. And what does he like to do? What was his activities? What was that? Hunting, yeah, he was a big hunter, right? He was always out in the fields, he was hunting, and as a result, he probably had darker skin because he was in the sun a lot. And his personality, would you say he was someone who led from the head, the heart, or the stomach? Stomach, yeah. He would go out hunting and then come back, I'm hungry, I'll eat anything. In fact, his brother, Jacob, his twin, notoriously tricked him out of his birthright over a bowl of lentil stew, which you got to be really hungry to give away something that great for a lentil stew. Or the cook was phenomenal, because that brings us to Jacob. What do we know about Jacob? These two were twins, but not identical. What do we know about his body? Do you remember what they say? Smooth. He had a very smooth body, right? He didn't have a lot of body hair. And his personality? He was closer to his mother and his father. Yeah, he was very sensitive, it says, growing up. And there's a very key phrase here. He dwelt amongst the tents, which is where the women are. Yeah, and he was a fabulous cook as a result, because when he made this stew, the brother's like, yeah. So he was out, and he was probably lighter skinned than his brother because he didn't go outside as much out of the tents. The women usually were lighter because they didn't go in the sun so much. And so these are twins, but very different, right? They're gendered very differently. So with that in mind, I think you've got all the backstory you need. I want to do a scene from Transfigurations, Transgressing Gender in the Bible, with Uncle Esau telling the story. Yeah, I'm Esau. You probably know my brother Jacob. Yeah, Jacob. He was very sensitive growing up. He liked to dwell amongst the tents with the women, their cooking, their gossiping, their scheming. He was a real girly boy. And since I was normal, our father Isaac, well, he favored me. Now, don't get me wrong. Although my brother Jacob was a girly boy, he liked the women, all right? In fact, he has 2 wives, and He slept with both their handmaidens. Yep. And he's got a package kids, and strong, strapping young men, all of them. Well, except for one of the youngest, Joseph. Oh, God, this kid. This kid, Joseph, he was trouble from the day he was born. Always crying, clinging to his mother, not wanting to go out into the field to do real men's work. And then he would have these dreams, these crazy dreams he told everyone about. Listen, boys are not supposed to dream. One day I pulled Jacob aside. I said, listen, brother, you got to do something about your kid. Toughen him up. It's a rough world. They're going to ride right over him. Does he listen to me? No. Indulges him. Gives him everything he wants, including that robe. You wouldn't catch me dead in a robe like that. For one, too expensive for my taste. A royal garment. The kind of garment that a king gives to his virgin daughter. Yeah, it was a princess dress. Yeah, my brother Jacob gave his son Joseph a princess dress. And that kid, he put that dress on. He flitted about the compound like he was some kind of butterfly. And I thought, this is not going to end well. And sure enough, one day the boys were out in the field doing real men's work when Jacob sent Joseph to go check on them. This kid, no sense in his head. He puts on this stupid dress. He goes traipsing across the countryside, making fools out of all of us. Well, his brothers, they saw him from a distance, and they said, enough of this dreamer. And they rushed him. They threw him to the ground. They beat him black and blue, trying to beat some sense into him. Then they ripped off the stupid dress, tore it to pieces, and defiled it in blood. They came back with the bloody garment and a story about how their brother was attacked by a wild beast. And that's all that remained. But later they pulled me aside. They told me what really happened. How they sold their brother to some traders going off to Egypt. Sold him as a slave. And I thought, that's probably all for the best. I mean, he might do okay for himself there in Egypt land where they go in for that whole girly boy thing. Well, years go by. I didn't give him a second thought. Who's got time? And then we had that drought. I've been through droughts before. You just got to be tough enough to ride it out, but not this time. It was like the earth was cursed against us. You couldn't scratch life out of the ground. It got so bad, we finally sent the boys off to Egypt to buy some grain. Not to beg. We're no beggars. So they go to Egypt, and they're brought before some high official of Pharaoh's court. And at first, they couldn't tell what it was. Was it a man, a woman, a eunuch with the headdress, the makeup, the flowing robes? Those Egyptians. Turns out, it was their very own brother, Joseph. Somehow that girly boy worked his way up through the ranks to become second in command of the whole kingdom. Now this was Joseph's chance to get back at his brothers, to get his revenge. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You don't let anyone ride over you. But does he? No, not that girly boy. He goes off weeping like a woman. Then he comes back to try to teach his brothers a lesson. And then he forgives them and he reconciles with them. He gives them food, he gives them shelter. He treats them like he's their sister or their mother, not like any man I've ever seen. And in so doing, that girly boy, my nephew, Joseph, he saved us all. We read the passage today, and truly he did. He saved them all and brought them, protected them through 7 years of famine. I always cry when I read the story of Joseph, especially that moment when he reveals himself to his brothers. It's so emotional. And he acts in such an extraordinary way, forgiving them like he did and reconciling. He becomes like the matriarch of the family, right? Bringing them close. It's not that men can't do that sort of thing, but it was never seen before in this family and in this text. Now, there's a mystery in this story that you can't find if you're reading an English translation. I talked to somebody this morning in the German translation, or the German translation of the Bible, it's actually there. But in the English translation, there's a mystery about the garment that Joseph wore. Sometimes it's talked about as a coat of many colors or a robe with long sleeves. But in any study Bible, including the NIV study Bible, there's a little asterisk and a note that the exact meaning of the Hebrew word is unclear, that scholars are unsure what the garment was that Jacob gave his son. So as a Bible scholar, I thought, okay, well, what's the word in Hebrew? Where else does it appear in the Hebrew text? That context might give us some clues. The word is actually a short phrase. It's ketonet pasim. Jacob gave Joseph a ketonet pasim. And if you look in the book of Genesis for this phrase, it appears nowhere else. It's just the garment that Jacob gave Joseph that the brothers ultimately destroyed. So you say, okay, the Hebrew Bible is vast. There's the prophets, the law, there's all this history. Surely the term ketonet pasim appears one other place. But it doesn't, except for one other story in the book of 2 Samuel, a story of King David. It's actually a story of King David's daughter, Tamar, the princess Tamar, and it's a dreadful story of sexual violence and of rape and what happens in a home and a country when we do not take that crime seriously. And in the story, David has multiple sexual partners and wives and concubines, and as a result, the palace is literally littered with his children, all these half-brothers and half-sisters, and at one point, Amnon falls in love with his half-sister, Tamar, and he lures her into his quarters and rapes her, and then rejects her. And in a sign of mourning, she rents her garment, she tears her clothing. And in the text, it says that the princess Tamar is wearing a ketonet pasim. And then it goes on to define it for us. The garment worn by the virgin daughters of the king, a princess dress. So I could just imagine a traditional Bible scholar looking at the Genesis account, looking at the 2 Samuel account, and concluding, the exact meaning of the Hebrew word is unclear. No, we have no idea. It could mean anything. If you have any intellectual integrity, you have to admit that one possible interpretation is that Jacob gave his son a female garment. It doesn't have to be the only interpretation or the definitive one or even the one you accept, but it needs to be on the table because it's in the text. And if we go with this interpretation for a moment, the story takes on a whole new light. Because in this family, there was a lot of tension about inheritance rights. Who's going to get all the stuff? Joseph is the favored son. He's getting all this stuff, and including this coat of many colors. So the brothers have stuff against Joseph. When they see him in public wearing the ketonet pasim, they get irrationally violent. And not only do they do violence against his body, but even the garment itself, they destroy it. A very beautiful, expensive garment that they could have gotten some money from selling. But no, they wanted nothing to do with it. There was something transgressive about this garment. And there's something punitive in their violence, like, we're going to teach you a lesson. And I hear about this type of violence happening all the time in the world today towards trans people, all kinds of queer people, but particularly trans people, gender non-binary, trans men, and especially trans women, particularly trans women of color. And the violence is so extreme. Every year there's an event in November called the Transgender Day of Remembrance. It's not the only day we gather to consider the lives and the contributions of trans people, but it is, to me, the most sacred day of the year because we gather to say the names of all the people who were murdered in the past 12 months who were trans, non-binary. And the list is always so long, and the violence is so extreme. And if you've never gone before and you are aspiring to be an ally to trans folks, show up. It will mean a great deal that you're just there as a witness. And Joseph, here he gets that kind of violence from his brothers. He survives, then he's shipped off to Egypt where, he's favored by everyone. He's beautiful. He's a beautiful young man, it says in the text. how the beauty of Joseph is marveled in the ancient world in lots of texts, actually. But he gets in trouble, goes to prison, but then he rises to the top and becomes second in command. The brothers come before him, as we read today, and they didn't recognize him because he was in full Egyptian drag. I mean, there was no way they're going to recognize him. And he had the power to crush them and the right to crush them, and that's what he was taught. That's what he was taught. That's how you deal with people. Unless they're coming groveling, giving you lots of gifts, you crush them, but he doesn't. He does this totally other thing and treats them differently. He deals with their violence and brings peace in a very different way. And not that men can't do that, but like I said, that wasn't modeled in that family until that moment. So for that reason and many others, I find Joseph to be one of the most extraordinary Bible characters. Which brings us to our third and final story. And the title is Climate Queer. Climate Queer, which of course is about climate change, which you knew already because you saw I was going there, right? Right, like you knew, like you saw, like, oh, this is all leading to climate change, right? It was like so obvious. For the one person for whom it's not obvious, I'll carry on. Yeah. So this last scene is about climate change, and I've never thought of myself as an environmentalist. You know, I love nature, but I love it as much as I love an art museum. Maybe I like art museums a little bit more because there's a cafe and there are no ticks. But about over 10 years ago, I became alarmed by climate change, by the reality of it as a social justice issue, and I got very curious about it. So much so that I took a year off from performance art and spent a year just studying climate science and climate communication. Like, what are people doing, saying about climate change? What's working, what's not working? And do I have a role in this? Like, what do I do? And I was like, what do I have? I just tell stories, and I can be funny sometimes. But I recognize that, well, you know, that's an important contribution to talk about climate change in a way that people better understand it and closer to it. So through all that, I ended up writing a play called Does This Apocalypse Make Me Look Fat? It's a comedy about broken bodies, large and small. And I thought I would end with that scene. And afterwards, we'll have we'll have some time for Q&R, questions and responses, because I find that to me at least, after a really compelling presentation, you may not have a question. There's just maybe an observation or a connection you made, or something you want to, say, I'm taking away this. I want to remember this. And I think if we did a Q&R, you would have less of these men standing up, giving their opinions in the form of a question. Have you ever seen that before? Women can do it too, but they just typically don't get to the mic as quickly. Nothing against you men. You know what I'm talking about, though. Here I am gay-splaining. So I'm going to do a scene from Does This Apocalypse Make Me Look Fat? And the character you're going to meet is Tony Bafuzio from the Bronx, who is based very much on my own dad, Pete Toscano from the Bronx. And before I took that year off, my dad had died. My mom had died 6 years earlier. And so my dad was very close to my heart. My mom was too. So in the show, I sort of embed them in different ways. And for my dad, it's kind of channeling him a little bit through Tony, but putting different words in Tony's mouth than my dad would say. So here it is. Does this apocalypse make me look fat? Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Bafuzio from the Bronx. How you doing? You doing all right? Yeah. Well, good luck, because they gave me climate change to talk about. Thanks a lot, guys. Listen, don't freak out. People freak out, right, when they hear climate change. They're like, listen, there's still hope, all right? There's solutions. Maybe some of you in this room are actually working on it. Thank you very much. We're not dead in the water yet, okay? Right? We haven't gone to hell in a handbasket, okay? All right, we can be honest. We know the shit's gonna hit the fan. But we don't yet know how much shit and how big of a fan we're gonna need to deal with it. So lots of questions remain. Now, have you noticed since this whole climate thing has come up, there has been a huge uptick in polar bear imagery in the world? and on the internet. It's like polar bear porn, but not the good kind. But let me tell you, these photographers, they're amazing. They take a photograph, they tell a whole story. You see this polar bear, it's on an ice floe. It looks so sad, right? It looks forlorn. Like it tugs at your heart. Like you want to go over and give it a hug, right? No, do not give it a hug. It will rip you to shreds. They're very dangerous creatures. But still, it's sad, right? The habitat's shrinking, so they can't go off and murder seals like they like to do. So you know what's happening to the polar bears? They're going up on land in Alaska. They're going to landfills and dumps as they're like the buffet. They go into people's garbage cans. They become a real nuisance. Yeah, polar bears are the raccoons of Alaska. They're disgusting. I don't like polar bears. They're dangerous and they're gross. The second most privileged white mammal on the planet. And the problem is all this talk about the polar bear, everyone's looking to the Arctic. And sure, the Arctic is warming and faster in other places, but it's also warming in Central America, where there's this disease, this fungus that's spreading like wildfire, attacking coffee plants. It's called coffee leaf rust. It's a real thing. Look it up, but not right now. And it's going to sound awful, but I don't know. I think I could live without polar bears. But a world without coffee? That's a dystopian future that I can't face. So we got to do something, right? And so like, okay, we got to do something. Now, something you need to know about me, Tony Bufuzio, I am gay, all right? If you got a problem with it, it is your problem, because I am, actually, that's not even true. I am not gay. I'm bisexual, okay? I'm bisexual. It doesn't mean I'm confused, and it doesn't mean I'm greedy. Well, I am greedy, but that's because I'm a Bufuzio. But, you know, so being part of the LGBTQ community, I thought, let me ask, you know, my friends, like, what's a queer response to climate change, right? Like, does it affect queer people more than other people, and how so? And what do we got, right? What's in our history, at our arsenal, to, you know, to contribute to this? Do we got something unique? So I began asking these questions and came up with a lot of interesting things. Like, so for instance, let me give you an example. All right, I'm going to tell you about, with climate change, the worst case scenario. All right, I don't want you to freak out, okay? This is the worst case scenario. You're not going to freak out, right? Okay, we're looking at the potential extinction of the human race. It's not going to happen. We won't let it happen. But ask yourself, who has faced potential extinctions and exterminations before? Well, lots of people, but homosexuals, gay people as well. I mean, back in the day, Nazi Germany, Hitler, what a piece of work this guy was, right? He didn't like anybody. He didn't like the Jews. He didn't like people with disabilities. He didn't like Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't even know what that one was about. And he didn't like homosexuals. God help the gay Jew for Jehovah in a wheelchair, public enemy #1. And Hitler, he kept list. They kept list of all the gay men. They weren't interested in the women, but all the gay men, they kept list. And when the time came, they rounded them up and put them in the concentration camps. And to identify them as gay, everyone had a little patch sewed on, and they had an upside-down pink triangle to show that they were the homosexuals. And in those concentration camps, they did sick experiments on these men, operations and drugs, trying to make them straight. It was horrible, and lots of them, like lots of people in the camps, didn't survive. But thank God, finally, the Allied forces, they swooped in. The Americans, the British, the French, the other ones, whatever. They came in to liberate the camps and let everybody free, except the homosexuals. When they understood what the pink triangle was, they were like, well, that's a crime in our countries too. You guys, you go back to jail. So we know a thing or two about potential extinctions and exterminations. You know, and me, coming from an Italian-American family, people often think, gosh, it's got to be hard for you, right? Like, what was it like when you came out to your parents as a bisexual? It was hard because the day I came out as a bisexual was actually the same day I came out as a vegan. Yeah, and they've been having a harder time with the vegan thing than the bisexual thing. I mean, just last week, we were at my grandma's house and we're having dinner. All my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my brothers, everyone was there. And the food is going by, and I'm just letting it go by. Sausage and peppers, meatballs, raviolis. Finally, the broccoli comes. Yes, And my Aunt Frances, she turns to me and she says, what's the matter? You don't feel good? Why aren't you eating anything? I said, oh, it's because I'm a vegan now. Oh, okay. What's a vegan? And my mom says, it's a pain in the ass. So when I'm thinking about climate change and history, there's a time in American history that I think is very applicable to what's going on with climate change and might give us some clues how to respond. Back in the day, there was this weird disease called GRID. How many of you have ever heard of GRID before? Raise your hand. Wow. This is a very informed audience. I'm very impressed. Yeah, the gay-related immune deficiency got renamed as HIV/AIDS. It was terrible. I mean, at that point in history, it was 100% fatality rate. If you got AIDS, you were going to die. And the younger, stronger men seemed to die sooner than the older men. And it seemed like at first it was just gays getting it, but then of course they realized anyone could get it. But you had a problem because you had a government that refused to acknowledge there was even a problem. A president, Reagan, who wouldn't even say the words HIV/AIDS for his first 4 years in office. A public that was hostile and frightened and growing more hostile, with hate crimes going through the roof. And the whole time, you had people suffering and dying. Hospitals at first wouldn't admit AIDS patients. The funeral parlors wouldn't bury the bodies. And so our ancestors, and some of you in this room, they had to act up. They had to get in the face of public officials. They had to change public perception. And they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They were young people. They were just like, they had to just do it. And they did extraordinary things. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a documentary called How to Survive a Plague. You watch that and you're like, these people, like, they were amazing. They changed laws. They changed how drugs are tested. Our relationship with our doctors today have changed because of the work that they did. It was extraordinary. And of course, they changed public perception too. They used storytelling and art and movies and music and quilts and ribbon. You know, we're gay, right? We're gonna like pull out all the stops. And they did incredible work. But they also made mistakes, right? And the work they did, we can learn from it for climate, but we can also learn from their mistakes. So for instance, with AIDS, everyone who had AIDS suffered, but not equally. Some people suffered more than others, right? Depending on their class, their race, their gender, their social equity problems that they're dealing with. Like with AIDS, we were all in the same boat together, just not all on the same deck, which is exactly how climate change works. It's weird, but true. Globally, climate change affects women more than it affects men. It affects black and brown people more than white people. It affects the poor and the working class more than the middle class and the rich. So basically, climate change is sexist, racist, classist, you know, all the stuff that we deal with very well, or not, which reminds me of a Bible story. I don't know, do you know the story about Joseph and his brothers? Listen, I got this friend Peterson. He says that Joseph was really wearing a princess dress, which I don't know about that. It doesn't matter, because that's not what the story's about. This is a story about climate change, right? And I'll explain it to you. So Joseph, he gets sent to Egypt. I don't know why or how, it doesn't matter. He's in Egypt, he gets in trouble, goes to jail. I don't even want to know what he did, right? It's not my business. He's in jail, and he's in jail, and suddenly Pharaoh, he's the big guy, he starts having these dreams, these weird dreams about cows. And Grandma Bafuzio says, it's never good when you dream about a cow. Pharaoh trying to get his dream interpreted, no one could interpret the dream. So finally somebody said, there's this kid Joseph in prison, he does dreams. So they haul him up, clean him up, and bring him before Pharaoh. And you know, Joseph says, all right, Pharaoh, like, so what's your dream? He says, I'm dreaming about cows. Cows. All right, well, tell me more. Well, in my dream, there are 14 of them. First, I see 7 beautiful, fat, sleek, gorgeous cows. But then they're followed by 7 other cows, but these are skinny, scary cows. And I'm panicking. And all of a sudden, the skinny, scary cows turn on the beautiful, fat cows and jump them and eat them, and I wake up in a panic. What does it mean? Well, Joseph armed with that data, predicted climate change, a temporary regional climate change. He said, listen, those cows, those 14 cows, they represent 14 years. You're going to experience 7 years of plenty. Whatever you plant's going to grow like crazy, just prosperity everywhere, followed by 7 years of nothing. Total drought, nothing will grow. So he predicts a temporary regional climate change, and then he proposes an adaptation plan. He says, listen, if we know this is going to happen, right, during those 7 good years, let's grow as much as humanly possible and store some away so that during the lean years, we got food for the people, which is really thoughtful, right? It's a very nice plan. And Pharaoh loved it. Now, I'm Roman Catholic. I don't know what you people are. I don't even know what the UCC is. I don't want to know. But I don't know if it's appropriate to critique a Bible character. Like, I don't know if like you get in trouble for that, but I have to say I got a bone to pick with Joseph. I do, honestly, because it was a great plan. It was effective, but it wasn't a fair plan. Because in order for the people to get the food from Pharaoh, they had to pay for it. And it wasn't cheap. So the first year, the famine's there. People are shelling out their money. A year or two later, they have no more money. And they're like, what do we do, Joseph? He says, you know, Pharaoh takes other forms of payment. What about livestock? Goats, chickens, camels? So they give up their livestock. Then the next year, they're like, we got no more livestock. Okay, well, you got your land. How about you give your land to Pharaoh? He will own it. You can still live on it, but you got to give him a percentage of everything you grow. All right. Next year, all right, Joseph, we're done. We got nothing else. He says, actually, you got something very valuable, your children. Why don't you give your children to Pharaoh to serve him in perpetuity? We won't call them slaves because that's not politically correct. It's like, all right, kids, sorry, we got to eat, right? The next year, Joseph, we're begging you. We got nothing. Oh, yeah, you know what? You got your own bodies. How about you become Pharaoh's servant too? So Joseph's plan, yeah, it was effective, but it wasn't fair. It led to oppression. It led to slavery. It led to Pharaoh being the ultimate 1%. And to me, a queer response to climate change is one that doesn't do that. A queer response to climate change brings everybody to the table, so we can talk about the solutions, that it doesn't affect anyone negatively. A queer response to climate change is making sure everyone's life is better off as a result of what we do. A queer response to climate change has human rights, social justice, love for our neighbor right at the heart of it. Because why should we go to the trouble to save humanity and everything else we care about if we're going to be doing the same damn bullshit to each other that we've been doing for thousands of years? We got to do better than that. And I get very angry and very frustrated when I land with this whole situation with climate change. Decades, 60 years, they've done nothing, seriously. You got these smart people, they went to college, right? They're supposed to know what they're doing, and they're sitting on their asses, and I'm angry, and I'm actually scared, actually. I'm scared, I'm frightened, because I'm like, where are the adults? I don't understand. And I got this friend, she tries to help me. Her name's Lila, she does yoga. And she's been teaching me some like breathing exercises to calm me down, which I need because I've been hyperventilating lately. So I've been having these weird sessions where I'm like sitting, I'm breathing, whatever, and in the middle of the sessions, I start hearing these voices. I mean, not technical. I'm not actually, don't worry, I'm not actually hearing voices, but it's like I'm getting a message or something from people in the future, like 200 years, 300 years in the future, a message, and you think, the people in the future, they're not gonna have anything nice to say to us, right? But I'm so confused because I know it's not just for me, and maybe for you too. I keep hearing this message over and over and over again, and I just keep hearing them saying, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything you did for us. And I'm thinking, what the hell are we about to do that they're going to thank us for it?